Okay, in the problem section of 5.3, I don't want to work all of those, but I want to do some that I think you might have trouble with or might have forgotten. For instance, let's look at number, you're supposed to do 1 through 6 all, so I'm going to maybe pick some evens, that way you could check them since you don't have them in the back of the book. It says, what percent of the world's land area has A, the U.S., so what percent of the land area of the world is the U.S., B is China, and C is Italy. Well, now you know percent is part out of a whole, right? Now, what is the whole land mass for the whole entire Earth? Well, in order to do that, that was in the last column there, and it was, we don't want to work with these huge numbers. And problem number one, what you were doing were writing these out as decimals, but those are huge numbers. So the whole landmass, if we write it in scientific notation, is 1.49 times 10 to the 8th. So what we're going to do for each one of these U.S., China, and Italy on number 2 is we're going to take their part and put it over the whole. So the part for the U.S. in land area was 9.36 times 10 to the 6th. That's its part, and then the whole is this what we wrote down at the bottom, 1.49 times 10 to the 8th. Now, I can go ahead and do this. I can say, what is 9.36 divided by 1.49? We'll split these apart like we did in the problem sections, okay? So what's 9.36 divided by 1.49? Well, that ends up being 6.281. I'm just going to do 6.28 because they gave us 2 decimal places, so I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. Now, that is times 10, and remember, the 8 minus 6 is 2, right? Okay. But where does the 2 go? It goes on the bottom because it was bigger on the bottom. So this is 6.28 times 10 to the negative 2. And if I move the decimal place over 2 spaces to the left, that's 0.0628 is a decimal, right? Now, that would be what in terms of a percent? 0.06 would be 6%. So this would be, if I want to make it a percent, we divide by 100, which basically means now let's bump the decimal place over to the right too. This becomes 6.28%. Let's do China down here. I'll do it in a different color since I wrote all that up there, but I don't really have room for it. What part of the world's landmass is China? It is 9.60 times 10 to the 6. 9.60 times 10 to the 6. That's its part. Now, what's the whole Earth's landmass? 1.49 times 10 to the 8th. Now, this fraction represents a part to a whole, but it's a fraction, and I want to write it as a percent, so I know to write something as a percent, I get it as a decimal, then I bump the decimal place over 2 to the right. All right, so let's do this. I know that what I'm going to get here is I need to divide out 9.60 divided by 1.49, and that gives me 6.442. Okay, but I'm just going to go out 2 decimal places because that's all they gave me as far as the digits up in this part of the, let me circle it in yellow. These are just to 2 decimal places, so I'm only going to write this one to 2 decimal places. And it was 442, so I did not round it up to 6.45. I left it 6.44. You need to divide that out on your calculator so you can see what I did. All right, now it's over 10 to the second because 8 minus 6 is 2, but there were more on the bottom. Well, this means this is 6.44 times 10 to the minus 2 if I want to actually write it in scientific notation. Now, this means move the decimal place over 2 spots to the left. That would make it 0.0644. Now that's the decimal amount. But what is the percentage amount? Well, for percent, we bump it over 2 spaces to the right. So that would be 6.44%. So we can see that China has a slightly bigger amount of land area than the U.S. does. I'm not even going to do Italy because you can follow that example. On number 3, you're doing what percent of the world's population. So instead of using the part of the land area over the total land area, you will use the part, and I'll go ahead and do 3A, for example. It's what percent of the world's population has the U.S. So now we're doing the population. We're doing part the whole. Well, what's the whole? It's the bottom. They tell you that in the bottom line of that chart there. The whole world population in 1987 was 5.03 times 10 to the 9th. That's very old statistics, isn't it? But what part was the U.S. in 1987? It was 2.44 times 10 to the 8th. Okay? So what we can do is we can divide out 2.44 divided by 5.03. Let's go ahead and get that part done. That leaves me, oh, wait a second, I didn't do that right in the calculator. 2.44 divided by 5.03. And I'm getting 0.485 and only 0.89. Let me just do this for a minute. Let me leave, and it goes on a little bit more, but I'm just going to chop it off there. I know I'm only going to want 2 decimal places, right? So if I look at this, I'll change that in a minute, I guess. 10 to the 8th over 10 to the 9th. That means if I do that, if I subtract the exponents, 9 minus 8 is 1, and there was more on the bottom, so we leave it on the bottom. So it's 0.485089 divided by 10 to the 1st. When you divide by 10, you just move the decimal place over to the left one more spot. So this is going to become 0.048589. Now, we only want, okay, this is the decimal approximation, right? Now, we're going to write it as a percentage. So when we write a decimal as a percent, we bump the decimal place over 2 to the right. So this becomes 4.85%. I kept up with the rest of that just so I could round at the end. I wasn't quite sure when, after I divided this out and I saw this, I'm like, let's just take care of deciding that where to put our 2 decimal places at the very end. They gave us 2 up here, so we'll want 2 here. But anyway, the answer is going to be 4.85% for 3A. Okay, number 4, they asked us to find the population density, and it's the number of people per area, okay? Square area, and then they give us the area in kilometers squared. So we want a part of the whole, and they're asking us to do this for U.S., China, Italy, and the world. I'm going to do some of these and leave some of them for you. For the U.S., how many people, what's the population density of the U.S., okay? So if we're just looking about for the U.S., okay, we would say how many people are in the U.S., well, in 1987, there were 2.44 times 10 to the 8th. So this is the number of people per kilometer squared. And this kilometer squared is coming from the land area. Okay, so the part of the people to the land is 2.44 times 10 to the 8th, and then we would divide it by the land area in kilometers squared, 9.36 times 10 to the 6th. Okay, so to simplify this, I'll just go ahead and do this part first. So this is where you're going to want a calculator. 2.44 divided by 9.36 ends up being 0.26068,376. I'll just take it out just momentarily there. We know we don't want more than 2 decimal places when we're done, so I'm just going to write down some of what I have in my calculator. And then if we do the exponent part on the tens, it'd be times 10 to the 2, because there's more on top than on bottom, and 8 minus 6 is 2. Well, that means what I'm going to do if I'm writing this in scientific notation is bump this over 2 spaces. So this becomes 26.0, and that 8's going to round that 6 up to a 7. So it's 26.07 people per kilometer squared. That's people over kilometer squared. Okay, so the book says 26.1, so they rounded it to 1 decimal point. I'm not quite sure why they did that, because they gave it to us in 2. Honestly, we know that you can't have 0.07 of a person anyway, so it'd be around 26 people per kilometer squared. Now, so you do the same thing with China and Italy, so I'm not going to go through all of those. I'll leave some of those for you to do, but I wanted to do some. Let me do 4D, though. So 4D wants to know for the world, okay? So how many people are in the world over the land mass in the world is the fraction we're going to make. Okay? Land mass in world. Can't hardly read that, but alright, so how many people are in the whole world? When they added it all up, they had at the bottom of the chart 5.03 times 10 to the 9th. And we're going to divide it out by 1.49 times 10 to the 8th. Okay, remember we divide this part out, and then we'll subtract the exponents on that second part. Okay, so using a calculator, 5.03 divided by 1.49 ends up being 3.3758. I'm just going to go that far. There's more. But then when I say it's times 10 to the 9 minus 8 is 1, and that's on top of the fraction bar, so I won't even bother drawing the bottom fraction bar because the exponent's bigger on top. Okay. So that means move it over one space because of that 1 is positive. So this becomes 33.758 people per kilometer squared. Now I would take this out to 2 decimal places because they gave us 2. I have a feeling the book's only going to give you 1 decimal place, but they're going to round it to 33.8. I'm going to say 33.76 people per kilometer squared just because they gave it to you with 2 decimal places, so I'm going to write my answer that way, but the book answer is 33.8. But anyway, that's how you would go about calculating that.